How many of you are feeling overwhelmed and stressed due to the coronavirus outbreak? Whether you have gotten laid off or you're not going to get to attend your wedding or your graduation like you were supposed to, everybody has something to stress about. The purpose of this speech is to tell you step by step how to make a piece of pottery and to hopefully alleviate some of the stress that you're feeling in the process. I've always been a firm believer that doing something artistic can alleviate some of your stress, and according to Tracy Bone, it's actually been proven that doing something artistic helps your mental and your physical health. I've been doing pottery for about 10 years now, and I've learned at 2 different studios and have had 7 different teachers that have had up to 40 years of experience themselves. So I've had a lot of experience making pottery, and I've done a lot of research on how to make pottery, and I've noticed that for me, art is one of the few things that actually helps my level of stress. So I choose pottery, but I know other forms of art also work too because I've tried some of those too. But I just think that it's really helpful for me. So today we're going to be talking about how to make a piece of pottery. And the steps to making pottery are wedging the clay, throwing the clay, trimming the clay, and glazing the clay. The first step to making any kind of pottery is to wedge the clay. Now, wedging the clay is important because according to Hugh Preston, it gets rid of any of the air bubbles inside the clay. Now, the air bubbles can be a problem later on down the road and can cause your clay to crack or even explode when it gets put into the kiln, so it's important that all the air bubbles are gone. Now, to wedge your clay, what you do is you just push down on it and push forward and roll it back in on itself. Just think of it like kneading dough, and just do it a couple times, and if it starts to look like a bull's head, you know you're kind of doing it right. So once you've done that for a couple minutes, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to form it into a ball. Now just roll it around, pat it in your hands a couple times, and it'll get there. The next step is to throw it. So what you're going to do is you're literally going to take your piece of clay and just throw it into the center of your wheel. Then you're going to pat it a couple times just to make sure it's really on there. After that, you're going to push on either side of the clay with your hands and push it inwards and up. That's going to make it form into like a cone shape. Once you have the cone shape, you're going to push it back down and make it a cone a couple more times just to make sure it's fully centered. And you can tell it's centered by if you look down on it and it's not moving, and if it doesn't look like it's moving while the wheel's spinning, then you know it's centered. So once it's centered, you are going to take your finger and you're going to make a hole at the very top. And you're just going to push down until you're about 1/4 of an inch away from the bottom. And then once you do that, you're going to take your fingers and you're going to gently pull it towards you. And that's going to make the bottom of your vase, and it's going to give you some walls for your vase. So once you've done that, now you need to make the walls taller and thinner. So you're going to take a finger on the inside and a finger on the outside, and you're going to gently pinch the walls together and move them upwards like this. During the throwing process, it's also important, according to Jace Michaud, that you keep your elbows into your body to make sure that they're not moving around, to make sure that you have full control over what the clay is doing. So once you've done the process a couple times of moving it up and down, it's going to make it taller and it's going to make it thinner. So just do that however much that you want it to be. The next step is to trim it. Now to trim it, it needs to be leather hard, which is also the stage where you can add a textile if you want to. And according to William Holmes, some textiles that you can use are cords or fabric, and wrapping it around it, or even pushing objects into it, making impressions. So those are some options that you could do. So after you've done that, you are going to want to trim it. And you'd start by trimming by flipping the piece over and attaching it to the base with a couple pieces of clay. And then you're going to take your trimming tool and you're just going to gently start at the center of the bottom, and you're just going to gently pull it towards you. If you want to make a foot, you can leave the outer rim untouched, and then you'll create a foot. So once that looks good to you, the next step is to glaze it. Now, before it can get glazed, you have to get it bisque fired. Now, just take it to a studio or somewhere like that, and they can do that for you and then bring it back. But once you've done that, what you can do is you just get your glaze and you just kind of paint it. 3 to 4 coats will probably do it. Just depends how heavy or light-handed you are with the glaze. So if you're like heavy-handed, just do 3 coats, and if you're lighter, do 4 coats. So it's also important to leave the very bottom of the vase with no glaze, otherwise it'll get attached to the kiln later on, which will be bad. And also leave a little bit of room, like the bottom 1/4 inch on the bottom, just to make sure that if it runs, it doesn't go everywhere else. So once you've glazed it and then you get it glaze fired again from that studio, it's gonna be done. So then you can totally use it. In conclusion, if you follow these steps, you're gonna be making pottery in no time. The steps to making pottery is to wedge your clay, to throw your clay, to trim your clay, and to glaze your clay. The purpose of this is to show you how to make pottery and hopefully alleviate some of the stress that you're feeling during this time. And I would like to leave with a quote from Picasso that says, "Art washes away from the soul the dust of everyday life."